right hand somehow managed to send that information while you all were at the round table. He'd been sending encrypted files to someone for several months, and Lorenzo's been working on hacking into those files as well as tracing where those files have been sent. They haven't appeared on any of the devices that we secured during the raids, so he suspects that they were sent to someone higher up in the international trafficking organization's food chain. This is Bedtime Stories, Grown-Up Edition, Poetic Justice, Epilogue. When Idra got to St. Lucia, Nadia was already at his estate. When he walked into the sitting room where she was patiently waiting, Nadia signed. What was so urgent that I needed to come to your house immediately and you were still in the States? Idra said, your son put a hit out on you. Nadia signed, what? Why? Idra said, because he wanted to hurt his father from the afterlife. You'll need to stay here on my estate, at least until we know that the danger's been averted. Nadia signed, and let me guess, you're going to go back to the States and leave me here alone. Idris said, you won't be here alone. You'll have plenty of security. I can't stay here with you, though. I need to go back and meet with the other heads so that we can put things in motion that will eliminate the threat and rebuild this family's manpower. We lost a lot of human capital when Stanley pulled that move. The other families are pitching in to help, but it'll take months to recruit and train the number of soldiers that we need. We'll also have to promote existing soldiers in order to fill the gaps in the lieutenant rank, and then do the same to the general level. I'd suggest that you go back and stay with Bella, but she's made the Lopez estate her home, and I don't know how well that would go over with Marisol. Nadia signed, why would that be an issue for Marisol? Idris signed, you're kidding, right? You were held up here with her husband for several weeks, and she knows that. You can't possibly think that she was okay with that. It's one thing for him to be here. I think it'd be a whole nother thing for you to be there. Nadia signed, but she understands what was going on, right? She knows that he and I are just friends. Idris said, I didn't know that you two were just friends. Nadia signed, what exactly were you expecting? What does Marisol think was going on here? Idris said, we all thought that the two of you had picked up where you left off, that you'd agreed to be... Nadia waved her arms wildly to get Idris to stop. Then she signed, what the hell kind of woman do you think I am? Yes, losing my husband and my son was a huge blow, but that did not turn me into the kind of woman who would be a man's mistress. When I chose Anon, it was hard to let Manny go, but I committed myself to giving him a real chance, and it did not take long for him to win my heart and my loyalty. The only thing that I got out of Manny's presence was closure. I used that as an opportunity to see for myself the kind of man he'd become, to get a better understanding of who my son was, to see if our father made the right choice. Now, I don't know what Manny may have been planning, but thankfully he respected me enough not to propose that. The only thing that he asked me about was my life, about raising Stanley, about whether I was happy with the way that my life turned out. Before I found out that my son carried out this sick vendetta, of course. If he intended to make me an indecent proposal, I don't know what changed his mind. But I'll gladly inform Marisol of the same thing that I just informed you. Nothing untoward transpired between me and Emmanuel Lopez. And I'll also inform her that he conducted himself the way that a married man should, and did more than I could have ever expected or anticipated. Now, whoever may have thought that I would actually go for that can go to hell. Meanwhile, in Dallas, Selima refused to wait for Stephanie to get to Puerto Rico before she got the update on what precisely was going on. She cornered the Queen Mother when she was cleaning up after Stephanie and CT's karaoke night and said, Aunt Bella, you're going to have to tell me what's going on. Stax left Renni here, LJ got out of here like a bat out of hell, and Angela is nowhere to be found. Queen Mother said, I don't want to go through this over and over again. I also don't want you hopping on a plane going anywhere. Where is your husband? Selima said, helping Q move furniture. Why? The Queen Mother said, find him and go home. You will get a full update in the morning, but I won't be telling anybody else anything else tonight unless I have to, and prayerfully I don't have to. When Selima walked away, the Queen Mother got a phone call. It was Marley. Marley said, Queen Bee, I know it's late, but Javier just called, and despite the fact that I don't have all the information, I know you, so I know that you'd want to know this as soon as possible. Angela and Stephanie's estate in Denver was just ambushed. They breached the front gate and took out the surveillance system. The only reason that we can even think of why they would do that is, the Queen Mother said, true. Marley said, right, and apparently LJ's on it. When I called him, he said he couldn't talk. He was in the middle of managing a team and trying to get a backup surveillance system up and going. Lorenzo's trying to backdoor the system to see if he can figure out who's behind the breach. The Queen Mother asked, has Javier figured out when and how Stanley got all of the intel to the trafficking organization? Marley said he believes that his right hand somehow managed to send that information while you all were at the round table. He'd been sending encrypted files to someone for several months, and Lorenzo's been working on hacking into those files as well as tracing where those files have been sent. They haven't appeared on any of the devices that we secured during the raids, so he suspects that they were sent to someone higher up in the international trafficking organization's food chain. The Queen Mother said, and is there any word on True? Marley said, according to LJ, she answered one of the satellite phones stashed in the underground passageway under Angela and Stephanie's estate. He's waiting for her to either call him back or for Stax to update him and say that she's been secured. Meanwhile, at Donovan and Maribel's, Donovan had just finished telling his wife about a small dilemma that he'd found himself in. He'd said, Sunshine, so listen, right? You know how part of my agreement with Porsha is that I'll go with her to her prenatal visits. Maribel said, yeah. Donovan said, well, her next one is the same day that I got that meeting in Houston. I can't move it, and she can't move the appointment. Maribel said, so she goes by herself then. Donovan said, the thing about it is, Medea had offered to go, and that would have worked. But she's got to handle this mess that Stanley created, and she's probably not going to be able to. If nobody goes with her from my family, that'll be considered a breach of the contract. Maribel said, and Angela can't go. Donovan said, apparently she's working with the families now, so she's going to be all caught up in this situation too. Maribel said, I know good and darn well you are not asking me to go with your baby's mother to her prenatal appointment. Donovan said, Sunshine, you know I don't even understand all that medical stuff anyway. You can get all the information and ask all the right questions and let me know what they say. Kill two birds with one stone. I promise to make it up to you. Maribel said, and how do you plan to do that? Donovan said, I pay attention. I know what you like. Let me surprise you. Maribel said, okay, but you better make it worth it. Meanwhile, at Miss Charlotte and Samuel's house, Angela had just laid eyes on Big Wood for the first time since saying goodbye to him in his hospital bed. She'd avoided visiting Miss Charlotte and Samuel's because she knew that it would look odd and be in contradiction with the story that Q had told the security about who was staying there with Miss Charlotte. But this night was a night like none other. Wood had demanded that his mother call Angela, and when she did, he demanded that Angela come see him immediately. Despite the fact that he still couldn't speak, he was using Melissa's tablet like a pro, expressing himself well and making his desires known. And he wasn't just using the tablet to express himself. His facial expressions and body language had been communicating his frustration and aggravation very clearly. He had questions and he needed answers. His woman and unborn child were in danger, and he needed to know why, what was being done, and what the updated status was. And he knew that Angela could tell him. So when Angela said that she didn't have a whole lot of information and she was flying in the dark, Big Wood was not pleased. Angela had told him about Stanley's letters, that she'd put LJ on relocating True and protecting Pastor Tanya, that Manny had already put a team on True's family so that the trafficking organization wouldn't try to use them as collateral, and that Samuel was ensuring that his sisters were safe. But she had not told him that her estate in Denver had been breached and no one had eyes on True. Big Wood was so frustrated with the lack of information and with how slowly he was able to communicate using the tablet that it looked like smoke was coming out of his ears. In a fit of pure frustration and rage, Big Wood blurted out, "You lie." 2 words. The first time anyone had heard his voice, since 3 bullets from 2 high-powered rifles took him down in an alley in Dallas, and they were music to Miss Charlotte's ears. In Denver, True had made up her mind. She was not sitting idly by, waiting for an extraction team. She was also not going to be a sitting duck. While common sense would dictate that Bosch would close the hidden door back inside the main house before he proceeded to get the bags, it was still possible that in his need to move swiftly, he could have left the door open, especially considering that neither he nor True had any reason to believe that there was an immediate threat. Yes, Stacks had said not to wait for the seasons to change and to assume that it was already hot, but they checked the cameras and there was no sign of a disturbance of any kind before they headed for the underground passageway or while they were in it. So staying put was just not an option. True couldn't see what was going on inside the house or anywhere else on the estate because the cameras had gone out, and she needed to at least know whether that door was closed. Whether it was or wasn't, she was not leaving Bosch behind, since all of the panic rooms and underground bunkers were pretty much set up the same. It did not take long for True to find what she needed. She grabbed the largest bulletproof vest she could find to make sure that her unborn child was sufficiently protected, a holster that could comfortably carry 4 semi-automatic weapons and multiple clips, secured said weapons and clips, and grabbed an automatic weapon for good measure, and then took off back down the underground passageway. Unlike the one that Q had built under the house in Dallas, this one wasn't exit only. Re-entry into the house was possible, and it took True several minutes to make her way back down the passageway. When she arrived at the door, she couldn't hear a sound. Then she remembered that the exit was soundproof, so not only could no one inside hear her, but she couldn't hear anything going on inside. She said a quick prayer, extinguished the light, and cracked the door. Before she opened it all the way, she waited for her sight to adjust to the darkness. It didn't make any sense that the lights in the basement of the main house would be out. Bosch would have needed it to traverse the basement. As her sight adjusted, she realized that it wasn't just dark, but there was an absence of light completely. The only explanation for that would be that somebody cut the power. Then it hit her. There was light in the underground passageway because the passageway was powered by an underground generator. But there was an above-ground generator that should have kicked in and powered the main house. So whoever cut the power was smart enough to get their hands on the publicly available property plans. The fact that they hadn't headed into the passageway meant that they did not have access to the full property plans. Instead of proceeding forward, she closed the door. There was no way that she could go in blind. Not only did she need to be able to avoid the enemy, but she also needed to avoid friendly fire. And in order to do that, she needed to be able to see. So she headed back down the passageway, went into the huge cabinet that held all of the weapons and other supplies, and loaded up her vest with knives, flash bombs, and zip ties. And then she grabbed a gas mask and night vision goggles. She was going to have to be a one-woman army. Bosch was armed, and if she didn't hear any shots, that meant he might be down. Night vision goggles in place, she headed back down the underground passageway. She slowly cracked open the door, assuming that whomever had breached the property was probably armed with night vision goggles as well. Hearing and seeing nothing, she opened the door all the way, headed inside the basement, and gave it a good look around. She spotted one of the huge duffels that Bosch had gone back for, and deduced that he'd probably gone back for the second, right when the explosion happened. She slowly and quietly made her way up the steps and found the basement door closed. It made sense that Bosch would close the door to the underground passageway, but if he closed the basement door, then he must have been trying to redirect the intruders away from the basement. She didn't hear any gunshots. She didn't hear any feet running. So she cracked the basement door, looked around, seeing nothing. She gave it a push and looked down to see the second oversized duffel, preventing the door from being opened fully. She slowly and as quietly as she possibly could pushed the door open while pushing the bag across the floor. She looked around while slowly squeezing through the small opening she'd created. She had to decide, left or right, processing all the variables: the location of the bag, the fact that Bosch was left-handed, the fact that the basement door opened out into the hallway to the left, and the position of the bag covering the front of the door made True pretty sure that Bosch had gone left. Whether he was under fire or not, there was only one place he would go. The only other place on the property that was not on the floor plans. Since there was 2 ways to get there, she'd have to follow the path of least resistance. She was going right. To the left was sitting rooms, studies, the dining room, the kitchen, the stairs to the upstairs bedrooms, the front entry, the back entry, access to the east wing of the house. To the right, the west wing, the bedroom that she'd been staying in, the direction that Bosch had been coming from. Bosch would have led the intruders away from that area. That's the way she needed to go. She tuned her ears, scanned the area again, and took off. Still light on her feet despite being very pregnant, Trill peeked inside the cracked door of her bedroom and spotted a shooter. He turned the room upside down and was going through the things that she'd left behind. She hung the automatic weapon around her neck, unholstered a 9mm, and quickly screwed on a silencer. Before the man knew what hit him, True had aimed and fired a muffled shot that took the man's life where he stood and dropped him. The plush carpet muffled the sound of his body hitting the floor. She quickly entered the room, closed and locked the door behind herself, cleared the room, the bathroom, and the closet. And just as she did, she heard sounds coming from the adjacent room that had been all set up for her prenatal exams. As she quickly attempted to make her way to the hidden passageway that would lead her down a corridor to the panic room behind the studies, the door to the adjacent room swung open and it was on. Here's a sneak peek of season 16, Genesis. Oh, hell no. Why are you here? Where the hell is Donovan? Maribel said, Porsha, don't start. He had a meeting that he couldn't change. He asked me to come in his place. Plus, he had some questions. Porsha said, oh, so he sent his doctor wife to ask them on his behalf. He's making this real easy for me to get out of this contract. Maribel said, no, he isn't. The contract stipulates that he'll support you through the pregnancy, that he or a comparable replacement will attend all of your doctor's visits with you. I'm the comparable replacement. Porsha said, and the old lady couldn't come? Or Angela? Maribel said, I'm the only Mrs. St. James who was available. The driver from the inpatient treatment facility, who was responsible for bringing Porsha to her appointments, waiting with her, and returning her to the facility, said, Mrs. St. James, is it all right if I go and park the van? I was gonna go with her up and leave her with Mr. St. James, and then come back down and move it. But Maribel said, sure, that's fine. She's not gonna try anything. Right, Porsha? Porsha said, and give you what you want, an opportunity to put your hands on me? I don't think so. Let's go. When Maribel and Porsha got on the elevator, Porsha pressed the button to go up to the 3rd floor. Then she looked at Maribel and said, so let me guess, your plan is to rub in my face that Donovan chose you. Instead of me making your life a living hell, you plan to make mine a living hell. Maribel said, nope. I plan to support my husband, help him parent his children, and be on whatever you want, Porsha. If you want war, it can be war. But I thought we went through all of this a week or so ago. Porsha said, then why does it feel like you here to humiliate me? Every appointment, that lady looks all up in my hoo-ha. You plan to look up there too? Maribel said, yeah, no, I'll pass. I simply plan to support you in whatever way you need. Go in with you to ask the questions that my husband asked me to ask, and step out while you're examined. If you're going to be having an ultrasound, which I expect that you should be, then I would like to be there for that. But you're the patient. You get to decide. No one's taking that right away from you, Porsha. Porsha said, oh, you're not going to pull rank because you're a doctor and demand to be there? Maribel said, not only is that illegal, but that would just be unethical. I wouldn't want someone to impose on me like that, so I wouldn't do it to you. Then the elevator dinged, notifying the ladies that they'd arrived on the 3rd floor. But before the doors could open, the power went out, the elevator shook, and the numbers on the top of the elevator fluctuated from 2 to 3, back to 3, and back to 2. As the elevator jerked between floors, and Porsha started having a panic attack. She said, oh my God, we gonna die.